Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter, where us four Backlot boys review every single Best Picture winner, and we are oh so close to finishing. Indeed, we were just discussing it before we hit roll on the episode. We got like two more after this. It's the 93rd episode of the Quest for the Bestest. My name is Timo, joined by Abram, Tanner, and Tucker, as always. And today, in the final stretch, we are going to be talking about Mel Gibson's 1995 medieval epic, Braveheart. A film I had never seen before, and I am pleased to have now seen it. It's one of the movies of all time, definitely, that gets brought up, and so happy to be talking about it here. But before we really talk about it, we've got to remind you of what happened last time, because not only did we talk about a movie, we talked about $1 Million Baby, but we actually couldn't really figure out where that film went. We were pretty stumped. There was a big three-way tie at the 7.9 number spot. So we left it up to you guys, to the viewers, and although we received few votes, we did receive.
By our own fault, by the way, because we are recording this, a mere, 24 hours, I think, a little 25 hours after that episode went live, so, that's on us, We were hoping that, people have the notifications on. Ring the bell, by the way, for the Backlot Banter YouTube channel.
And subscribe.
So you can weigh in on these pressing matters as soon as they come to forefront.
But what was decided was that $1 Million Baby would go at the top of the 7.9 ties, so above Slumdog Millionaire, which we were debating, and above Mutiny on the Bounty, which we were also debating. So at the 44th spot, the newest entry on our list is $1 Million Baby, Clint Eastwood's movie. So congratulations. That's like in the middle of the list, almost straight in the middle of the list.
True.
Yep. Now,
Yep-a-rooney.
Do we have a comment to be read aloud? A proclamation, perhaps, from a viewer afar, written on a parchment scroll?
Is this supposed to be a
we have to get it run over by our fellow friends of some sort.
Send a writer to go read the comment.
Oh, yes. Sure. Abram?
Yeah, we do, and it's a comment that comes from our Discord server. Join our Discord. Link in the description. This comes from our treasured friend and associate and son, Al Naz, who gave us that vote for the position of $1 Million Baby. So I'm just going to skip his preamble about that position and dive right into the meat of the comment, where Al writes, "Thanks for the great discussion with great points that people probably didn't think about when they saw the movie upon its release in 2004. I saw $1 Million Baby when it came out, before the #MeToo and Time's Up movements, so I do need to rewatch it. Although I agree with Tucker that the emotional impact of the film outweighs what it has to say for me. And Hilary Swank's performance is one of the best female performances of the 2000s. I give a lot of weight to strong characters, relationships, and performances. I'm interested in people and relationships. I do need to rewatch this movie for the political climate today, though, which is different from 2004. To sum up, this isn't just a boxing movie for me. I also agree with Abram and Tanner on the great noirish lighting, and I do like the solid classical filmmaking with good production value. The film also just resonated emotionally with me."
Well, there you go. Thanks, Al Naz. Very well written. Lovely comment.
Yeah.
We like a comment that gasses us up a little bit, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I mean,
and Al Naz is very good at that. Just a ray of sunshine every time that he has something to say in the Discord. I love it.
Yep.
And then he comes in and he's like, "Oh, actually, I've met everyone that you've ever thought of was in a movie." I'm like, "Whoa, wow, that's crazy."
So come join the Discord and be around people like Al. Don't let our presence there scare you away.
No, absolutely not.
Lots of cool
It
people.
would initially, but there are other people, not just us.
I mean,
Not just trapped in a dark room with the four of us. God, that'd be terrifying.
You have to ignore me, like photoshopping Tim Allen's face onto the Alien Covenant poster to make.
Well, you would
Alan
never
Covenant.
do that, right?
Right.
You would never do that.
No,
right?
no.
Okay.
Get around that.
Enough rambling. Let's talk about the movie Braveheart. Do we need a plot synopsis, or should we just dive right into the meat and what we thought about the film?
I'll do a plot synopsis.
Don't break tradition,
I like doing these.
Timo.
Okay.
Help our viewers out.
We are in it's like 1138 or something like
13th
that.
century.
Some year that seems
13th
so
century.
early that it doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And we meet a young William Wallace. All right.
As far as we're aware, human history starts with like World War One.
Yeah.
True.
So this is like, I don't know, this is Cro-Magnon times.
Yeah. William Wallace. Okay, he's a young lad in the Scottish countryside. And you know what? The British, as they are off to do, are giving the people around them a real tough time. They want to just take over. They want to own Scotland. You know, they want to own a lot of places, and Scotland is one of them. And the Scottish people, if you can believe it, not too keen on being like controlled by the British. So after his father is killed by the British, William Wallace goes off with his uncle and, you know, gets alerted, travels the world a little bit, and by that I mean he travels around Europe, and comes back to sort of put together a movement of the Scottish people against the British controlling, you know, monarchy. He stages some revolution, stages some insurgency in the great nation of Scotland, and even hopped across that little channel to go and take the fight to the British themselves. But things don't work out too well for our pal Will Wall. The love of his life, his childhood, is Will Wall. The love of his life, obviously, is killed by some British soldiers, and eventually he is betrayed and captured before being brutally tortured and murdered for his crimes against the British crown. Beheaded even.
Bedicked.
But... Well, actually disemboweled. Apparently, we misunderstood that scene when we watched that.
No, I believe he was also castrated.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well,
He was
That's his
bedicked.
head canon.
That's besides the point. But of course, you know, he did inspire some change. He did inspire some people around him that eventually did posthumously for William Wallace go on to gain independency for Scotland.
For a little while, until history shows us that England then recaptured them like 200 years later. But it's okay.
Well, this film doesn't really have much of a regard for history, so I don't think that's too important.
And I want to center this conversation around historical accuracy in some areas, because this is a film that I watched in theaters. Tanner and I got to see it on like a 30th anniversary, 40th anniversary showing, something like that. It actually doesn't even line up. We saw it in theaters a couple years ago, and neither of us had seen it at that point. And watching a film that is so grand in scale was really just an impressive experience, especially because it is so uncommon for us to be able to go and recapture that big screen cinematic experience with a film that was intended to be seen on this kind of in that kind of style. And when I saw it that first time, both of us absolutely loved it. I'm spoiling a little bit of Tanner's thoughts, and rewatching it here, I had kind of forgotten why I liked it that first time. But as the film starts gathering its momentum, I'm like, oh yeah, never mind. I remember why I liked this movie. And then I think it loses a lot of steam going into that second half. And I still like the movie. And I think that it's impressive in a lot of ways. But I think I'm a lot more critical on it. On a second watch, I don't know if the characters really stand up to much scrutiny. The plot is very basic. And I don't find the political underpinnings of this whole situation particularly compelling or well spelled out. And obviously it's a mess historically. So, but I think this film is very good on the whole. And I'm excited to sort of break this down and maybe with three other brains pick apart the themes and the characters of which I am not very certain on in Braveheart.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Tucker, I'll come up right on after you there. Because, yeah, I mean, you spelled out a lot of my thoughts as well. Of course, we did see this for the 25th anniversary of this film. I believe
40th.
We saw this in 2020, early 2020, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I really liked it then. Waned on it, just mostly because, I forgot why I liked it as much. And then on a rewatch, of course, I was reminded. And I don't know as much if I agree with the sort of common complaint I think we're gonna see about it losing steam in the second half. I think it is pretty consistent all the way through, and it just maintains a very good tenor all the way through for me. I think there are some things that Tucker you said there about our characters not being the most complex, or the political themes not being the most in depth or complex either. But at the same time, what really struck me about this rewatch of Braveheart is like, yes, it's like a historical epic, but it's also like a slobs versus snobs movie, which is typically a genre that is reserved for like Revenge of the Nerds and Caddyshack and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we've taken that and we put it on his historical epic, and that's why I think this is so endearing. Why Mel Gibson is sort of very charismatic in this role, and why his supporting characters are so fun to watch him pal around with as they, chop the heads off of British soldiers, is because it's a slobs versus snobs movie. It's just endearing just an endearing way to structure a story and a conflict.
Yeah. Abram, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fun. That's kind of where my thoughts on Braveheart begin and end. I made a comment.
See you next time, guys.
Yeah.
I made
cool.
a comment. Keep warm.
Peace.
I made a comment about halfway through my viewing, because I took a break to have dinner, that I felt like I'd seen Braveheart. I didn't need to see the other 90 minutes. I kind of get it. And having now seen all 3 hours of the film, I don't necessarily agree that the pacing is worse in the second half. I just don't think the film has enough sort of material to sustain it for 3 hours. That's more my issue. Because the second half of the film still has a lot of plot, still has a lot of action. There's still a lot of things happening that keep that pace up. But the problem for me is that the success of Braveheart is in its spectacle. It's beautifully shot. The score is sweeping and huge. Those action sequences are bloody and exciting. But I agree. I just don't think that the characters are really characters. They're like pieces that further a plot for the most part, in my opinion. I don't really think the politics of the film are really a factor. Basically, everyone involved in the political intrigue of this movie is like a D tier character. It's ostensibly just like a movie about like American freedom ultimately, which I also want to talk about. So I'm not even that invested in it as like a historical piece. What I'm really interested in the movie on the level of is like, damn, it's cool watching Mel Gibson kill some guys. Damn, the movie's shot really well. There's some great moments of wit throughout the film. But I just don't think that those tenets are enough for me to look at a 3-hour Braveheart endeavor and say, yeah, I'm totally satisfied by it. Because I just don't think there's actually a lot of substance here.
Sure.
I think I'm finding myself pretty much in agreement. I'll synthesize the points that all of you have made in that I did find it fun. I was thinking to myself, they don't really pick very many like medieval movies to have as Best Picture winners. The medieval movie genre is not something that usually garners a lot of award wins with sword and shield and slashing and killing. And it's not a fantasy movie because it's trying to be realistic, which I think at least on a surface viewing, if you're not thinking about it too hard, it succeeds in. The dudes are wearing like the right clothes, and then you look at the battle and you're like, why do the two forces just run at each other and then engage in a gigantic... That's not how they fought battles back then. But nonetheless, I was entertained, although I think that the characters are particularly weak. I think that I don't even remember her name, but his love at the beginning of the movie, Murren is not a character and has zero she had no agency and she had no defining characteristics to her at all. And so
attractive to Mel Gibson.
Yeah, or they were childhood friends. There you go. Boom.
Sure. Oh, I forgot about that part. Yeah.
Yes.
So the film, while it succeeds on its like big level, I think in terms of pulling me through this narrative that is for the most part like going, I think I'd like the first half better, but the second half is all right. I am in on the political intrigue. I'm like figuring out what's going on, and I like this king character and his fail son, and it's an engaging enough plot line. There is some thematic material in here. I think the film is trying to talk about stuff of death, of like knowing when your time is coming versus like not wanting to die or to wanting to die in a good or a valiant way. But I don't really think the film like nails down what it's trying to say in any regards. Even though it is very long, it doesn't, I think, spend a whole lot of time focused on themes and whatnot. Yeah. Instead, we get battle sequences, which are fun in their own right, but they don't, I think, push us into our stereotypical quest discussion of a Best Picture winner.
Yeah.
So from that lens, actually, you know what I'll do? I'll switch it up a little bit. I'll harken back to how we used to start the Best Picture nominee review videos, and I'll list off the wins and noms up top, so we can sort of have a lens on which to discuss this film.
All right.
So, Braveheart won Best Picture. Hey, that's what we're talking about here today. It also won Best Director for Mel Gibson, Best Cinematography for cinematographer John Toll, Best Sound Editing, and Best Makeup. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, written by Randall Wallace, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, Best Editing, and Best Original Score.
Pretty sweeping across the board there.
That's a lot of nominees.
Except for acting, it basically got everything.
Yeah, it is interesting that this film got no acting nominations. I think it was the only Best Picture nominee, and obviously this is quite rare for a Best Picture nominee, a Best Picture winner no less, to get no acting nominations.
It's true.
Well, should we start there?
I mean, the acting isn't like, what would you nominate out of this film in the first place? You know what I mean?
I just think the default is to have the guy playing a historical figure and giving a loud, brash, sort of, frankly, iconic performance to be nominated for Best Actor, even if it's not like the most heartfelt or like complex, layered character. I think that like I didn't know the nominees for this, and I'm surprised that the thing on face level is like, okay, I know what the Academy usually does. It's like, yeah, he's totally doing that role, and I think that he does it really, really well. I think that it's the script that doesn't do William Wallace the most justice, but Mel Gibson absolutely gives this his all and makes William Wallace a character that you really want to follow and root for, because he has this sort of twinkle in his eye when he's being a little bit charming and has the incredibly commanding presence, but is also like a really charming guy that can kind of bring the tension down when he needs to and bring tension up when he needs to. I would have liked to have said, I don't know the other nominees from this year, so maybe they're all better than this, but I think it would have been a totally fine nominee for Best Actor.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I agree that he is quite charismatic in this role. I mean, he is, and I'm going to keep bringing this up because I feel like it's a great observation that I've made, if I can just pat myself on the back a little bit, about Braveheart being a slobs versus snobs movie, and he is he's the centerpiece of that. He has to be, the charming guy who goes out and, is learned and goes to Rome and with his uncle Brian Cox, who I like to see show up in this just for a brief time.
Rip.
Yeah. Well, for those who know. And of course, he comes back and, that's what he stands out among the rest of these Scottish characters here because, he speaks Latin and French, and he knows about the tactics and how to get inside people's minds just because he's seen the world a little bit more. And I think he is quite good in these brief, mostly contained to the first act of the film, romantic sequences with Murren. I think that there's a sensitivity to him in those moments as well. But he also brings out the fierceness that is required of the William Wallace character, the charismatic warlord leader that brought righteous violence against the British crown. I think he has a lot to work with here, actually, and Mel Gibson does make the most of it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that a lot of things aside from Mel Gibson's sort of delivered performance give the character of Freedom Braveheart a lot of their personality. I first of all, I think it's Mel Gibson's size. A lot of what does it for me is how big he is and his big mane of hair, and the way that he's make-upped and the way that he's choreographed. And there are a couple great moments of performance from him. The two that stand out to me is one. It's a war movie, so you got to have the rousing speech, and he gives quite a rousing speech.
Yes, of course, they can take our lives, but they won't take our freedom is one of the most iconic movie quotes of all time.
Yeah, so
but also saying that doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of the film. Is like he's talking to like the 10 guys in the front. And there's 900 of them or whatever. It's like,
all right, cinema sins ding, we get it. The people in the back can't
world
get
sins. Like I just want to know, like how did they deliver speeches to a crowd of that size before? I don't know. I was thinking about that the entire time. I don't know why.
It's like he has that moment, and he also has the moment that I really like when he's speaking with the princess, and the aide says something in, I think it's Latin to her, and then he replies in Latin. There's a couple moments where he's able to illustrate through his delivery of dialogue that he's working with some material here. But for the most part, I think it's the hands of all the people around Mel Gibson, Mel Gibson's time in the gym that makes William Wallace a compelling character. It just goes back to what I think one of the points we're harping on, that the review is like, I just don't think that these characters are that deep. I just don't think that the arc that Wallace goes across lends itself to a lot of great acting opportunities.
Yeah. There's not too much of an arc.
Yeah.
And I think that is why I don't love his character as like an iconic, really interesting movie character to me. I think that I put more emphasis on his performance because I think what he is given, he sells in terms of being a personality. I think he has a good variety of personality traits in that he can be fierce and he can be charming and he can be witty. Like, he covers those bases very well. But in terms of William Wallace as a person, as an intricate character with a backstory that I really know super well, and I know it, like the why he's chasing these things, it's all very surface level. And I think that for me that's a script problem and not necessarily on the performance, because what we're given from him is sad childhood and then confident adulthood, outside of the moments when he has to be sad because his wife of 20 minutes just died. But those are not enough for me to really feel like this guy, I can resonate with this guy. Like, I really know how his clock ticks, except for if his clock is ticking just because he's just, a confident guy and he wants to see freedom. But to me, that's just not enough to like be like, oh my God, William Wallace, one of the like interesting movie characters of all time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that William Wallace could have been played by a bunch of different people. Abram, you're kind of right that Mel Gibson embodies the physical role very well, but I do think if we were to remake the movie, you could cast like somebody else in the
Chris Pratt.
Yeah, something like that, and they would do like a similar level job, because I actually really do think that he's missing some character notes that we don't really ever. There's a bit where he's like reluctant to fight and he doesn't want to, and he just wants to like raise his family, and of course his wife is killed. Seemingly she exists in the plot to be killed, but she's
not a real person in history, as we can get to the historical inaccuracies of this movie in a bit.
But I think that we aren't shown that moment where he redirects his anger towards the British and to where he himself has this realization of the leader that he is capable of and that he kind of needs to be. It just kind of happens, and we see the before and we see the after. But I would, that's an important character moment. I would really have liked to seen him struggle to like, I need to take up this mantle, or I need to go and ride out and enact my vengeance. We understand, I think, a lot of what's happening and why people are doing stuff in this film, because it gets away with not saying a whole lot. A lot of the cinematography and the script, I think, is very sparse and uses a lot of looks. We get so many glances, reverse shot of like people looking at each other in this movie over and over and over again, which is doing a lot of like plot level lifting. But that does mean that it's like there's not so much performance when the characters like literally are only acting with their faces most of the time.
Yeah. Timo, I think you bring up a good point there, in that it seems like such like it's a connection you can draw, but I don't know if a lot is born out of it or written out of it to be like, William Wallace decided to do this because Murren was killed. And that is the impetus for his initial assault on the British soldiers. But I feel like that kind of gets away from the movie a little bit, and it does largely get concerned with the camaraderie of the rest of the guys, and him, the intrigue of him being betrayed and who's really on his side, and like Robert the Bruce being swayed a little bit between William Wallace and his father. And it comes around in a big part at the end, obviously. I just don't know if it's there, if it's present in, he has a dream sequence somewhere towards the middle of the film, but I don't think that conflict, that drive within William Wallace is truly explored to a certain extent. That drive becomes William Wallace loves freedom, and don't you too, American viewer of this film.
Freedom!
Yes. But also, to
maybe the most dramatic single line in a movie.
Yes,
single word.
You can see it.
Single word,
This is a commendation upon Mel Gibson's performance. You can see it like bubbling up through his throat and everything. Cool stuff. But
massive throat.
Timo, to your comment about how anyone could have played William Wallace, there is, of course, with a iconic role. We've been throwing that word iconic around jokingly or seriously. It is an iconic role, though. For an iconic role like this, there were a number of people considered. Apparently, Mel Gibson did not want to play the title role and only wanted to direct. But Paramount would only agree to produce the film if Gibson starred. But a number of the names that were thrown out, apparently people who were considered, Mel Gibson wanted actors Jason Patric and Brad Pitt to play the title role.
Brad Pitt.
Huh.
Yeah.
Jeez. Huh.
95 Brad Pitt, right off of 7, is gonna play in
Well,
be
he
in
certainly
Braveheart.
would have been more accurate to the supposed age of this character.
Yes,
because he's
yes,
supposed
that's
to
an
be
issue.
like mid 20, late
25,
20s,
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. And he's got just deep lines on his
Mel
face,
Gibson
like Jesus.
Yeah, Mel Gibson was 37 playing 25 in this, and you can tell. That's
Whoa.
a 90s 37.
I never-
Also, other actors considered
Yeah.
Daniel Day-Lewis, Liam Neeson, Christopher Lambert, who's
really?
actually Scottish, Jeff Bridges, and I don't know if this one is true. This seems outlandish to me. Robin Williams.
No
were
way.
considered
I was gonna
as
say
well.
that jokingly.
Yeah.
But whoa.
Yeah.
That would be a very different film.
It would be. Although, Robin Williams has done serious in the past, but,
Well,
also
he
there's
usually
comedic
does
stuff in
serious.
here.
He does serious with an edge of. Well, yeah, no, you're right.
I think
He
this
would have
movie's
certainly
kind of
sold
funny.
the comedy a little better.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. it
But
does.
Let's talk
I
about the
think
comedy
that
here.
Because you're right.
that's
Tucker.
exactly why we liked the movie so much when we saw it in theaters. Is we were surprised by a historical epic of this kind having a humorous edge. You barely ever see that. The other historical epics that we've watched on this are incredibly dour. Out of Africa, The Last Emperor, Lawrence of Arabia. These
Ben-Hur.
films, Ben-Hur.
Mm-hmm.
These are serious films about people dying and combat and war and the state of the world.
And that's what this
is too.
movie is about, except it has some jokes.
Yes. Except for it has like
A lot
him,
of
like
and
doing
great
little winks sometimes.
visual gags. I think the jokes don't always land, but moments where the king throws his gay son's gay lover best friend out the window, because that's totally how that
Haley.
scene's supposed to be coded. Like, come on, like that. Those two
Yes.
characters. It's so obvious. I don't know. They should just say it. Whatever. They probably wouldn't.
I don't know how much Mel Gibson wants to tread on queer topics during the 90s or at all.
But when he throws that dude out the window, it's an absurd moment, but it is pretty funny. And I think there's a number of
Feels
them.
like Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
It does. This movie has that kind of vibe every once in a while, and it's
Yeah.
mostly right.
I mean, the entirety of the army turns around and shows their naked asses to,
Yes.
to the
It's a Monty
English.
Python bit.
And it's so
And their
funny.
willies. Don't forget they show their cocks to them first, and then they spin around it. They get arrows shot at them, and then they turn around and moon them. And this is exactly that moment is where it hit me and was like, this is like a fucking Revenge of the Nerds movie right here. We have like the snooty British men across the way being like, oh my, I can't believe they're doing such atrocious things during the honor of battle. And then you have the other guys that are like waggling their lily white asses at them. Like, I was like, this is a fucking slobs versus snob story here. I also love, I think maybe one of the best comedic presences in the film, and maybe Tucker, if you can pull up the cast member, but the character of Stephen, the Irishman.
Stephen.
Oh, the
I
Irish
love
guy.
him.
When the Irish conscripts and the Scots run together, and at this point the movie had been running a little dry for a while. It didn't have a lot of humor.
David O'Hara.
David O'Hara, thank you.
When those two armies run up and they're like, "Oh, how you doing?" and like shake, like
Yeah.
They shake hands.
great funny
But
moment.
well, like his introduction of him just being like this crazy dude who is talking directly to God. And he's like, "Oh, do I get to kill Irishmen or do I get to kill Englishmen?" And he calls Ireland his island and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then of course he turns around and saves William Wallace's life from the other guy who joined with him, who is seemingly normal. But nay, you gotta trust your heart with these things. And then he goes on to become like a right hand man for William Wallace, along with Brendan Gleeson, who I also think is quite good here.
Yeah, Mel Gibson, known for his tolerance, is trying to tell you not to judge a book by their cover. In
Yeah,
Braveheart.
well, we probably needed to address the Mel Gibson stuff at some point, and thank you for bringing it up, Abram.
I don't want to comment on Mel
No,
Gibson.
sure,
for-
yeah. Just an awful, despicable human being that Hollywood
Right.
has seemingly forgiven now.
Hard to tell.
Hard to tell.
I think that the comedy of this movie, as I said, was a surprise when I saw it. And certainly the element that kept me so engaged with a movie as epic and historical and as long as this is, and I think the reason why that second half doesn't engage me as much is it's noticeably less comedic in tone, and it's much more focused on the drama and on the political intrigue of sending messages back and forth and staging, the attack on that English city of which I can't remember. York. I'm like, I knew it had a famous name. Mm-hmm. It's an old York. But
it is old York.
Yeah. Yes, that's my point. But the second half being less humorous, I guess, is kind of natural for the direction the film is going to lead to a dramatic and sort of dour ending. But I like humor, and when humor not there, I'm like.
Yeah, I mean, but I think Tucker, you nailed it on the head.
Quest for the bestest analysis at its finest.
Yeah, I think Tucker, you nailed it on the head there, though, about why it takes that different tone going into the second half of the film. And I'm trying to sort of nail down the exact turning point of it. It's obviously around the time where
so the big speech happens, I feel like, about the middle of the movie, and there's that big battle that is that's kind of, I feel like that's like the Braveheart battle. That is the one that we are that is stuck around in cultural memory from this film. Yes. And then
you might think of it as that final act battle, but it's not.
It's right in the middle.
Middle, yeah.
Is it when he decides to? I think it's probably
it's when he decides to invade Britain.
And now we enter into the second plot section in which he's no longer just fighting, but he has to deal with the politics of his own lords or the lords of Scotland, and we do have to get into the shifting alliances and betrayals of the medieval politics, which is it. It's not terribly interesting. It is kind of, it's a great emotional moment when we see him, when we get to see Mel Gibson play the betrayal, that moment. And then I forget who plays Robert the Bruce, is I see it on his face. I was on the wrong side. That's an actual arc. And there's a moment there that we actually have some character changes. Some characters are
Angus McFadden, by the way.
Well, he did. I thought he did pretty well. He was convincing.
Think so too?
Sorry, Timo.
Well, this is the cutting. I think it's I don't know. This politics is it the highest and best use of our runtime? Maybe not.
Yeah, in the spirit of the cutting off episode, which is what this one is becoming, I'm just going to keep going. I think what's interesting in the structure of the film is that I look at it like this, because if literally halfway through the film, 90 minutes. We have crowned William Wallace as Sir, right?
Yeah.
And we're having the big noble the big noble argument, the big scuffle, sure.
Yeah.
Before that point, if we can say that William Wallace has some sort of arc, it's already concluded essentially by now. He goes from being the child with trauma and something to prove to being this passive guy who's sparked to become this revolutionary hero. And he does his revolution. His arc is done by 90 minutes into the film. Mm-hmm. So what it becomes in the second half is more plot. It's basically the adage in screenwriting, something has to happen to your characters 5 minutes before the film begins and 5 minutes after it ends. But we see 90 minutes after it ends. Yeah. And I think that's part of my issue. Because what does Freedom Braveheart have to do in the second half of the movie? He's got to go fight.
Are you referring to the character as Freedom Braveheart?
I have been, yes.
Okay, yeah. I thought you were making a weird phrase earlier. I'm like, hold on, he could be referring to the character as that name.
He has nothing else to do but to just fight battles. So we introduce this. He says not really an introduction because Robert the Bruce has been sort of percolating in the background somewhere, but suddenly he must ostensibly become a protagonist of sorts.
Yeah, no, definitely.
He's a historical figure. He's a Civ 6. He's like the Civ 6 leader of Scotland. So we gotta. Everybody knows him.
And this is the issue with Braveheart, I think, because the second half then becomes
he's Braveheart, by the way. That's what the historical name of Braveheart refers to is Robert the Bruce, which I think is interesting. Never mentioned in the film.
Well, yeah, because the second half of the film just becomes about traveling down these political plot lines that are so removed from what we care about as an audience.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to the motivation of Bill Wallace.
I
Billy
call
Ball.
him Double W or Dub Dub for short.
Sure.
Wubba lubba.
I like to think about one of the best revenge films, John Wick.
Okay.
The entirety of John Wick is about moving towards the ultimate root cause of the act that's setting us out on a quest for revenge. It's all about getting to the guy. John Wick ends when we've gotten to the guy and he's done and the quest for revenge has been satiated. The quest for revenge in Braveheart is satiated about 40 minutes into the movie.
Either that
And
or
the-
the quest for the revenge is just such an impossibility of you have to kill the king,
Right.
which could never happen because that just didn't happen historically. Even they couldn't diverge that far outside of the bat. Like even though they do else, but they could. That would be too far, I think.
The film basically expects us to sort of, again, to Tanner's glib point from before, transpose our American feelings about freedom onto this plot and take it on some sort of ideological level. But the ideology of this movie, in my opinion, comes down to New Hampshire's state slogan: "Live free or die." You can. That's what the entire movie is about. After we've avenged Murrin.
Yes.
Murron.
And and that's my issue. It feels like with every passing sequence, we're getting further and further and further from the moment I was hooked by Braveheart, which is when she gets killed.
So I think that what's interesting to talk about here is a line in the film, because when that halfway point hits and William Wallace in that scuffle among the nobles is like, yo, dogs, we gotta go invade Britain. And they're all like, that's really weird of you to say, William. We thought we were just going for freedom for Scotland. And he's like, no, we're gonna go invade England. We're taking York, baby. And then they do, like, without the help of the nobles. You know, at that moment, I was like, okay, why is William doing this? Like, because that moment is a perfect moment for a new conflict to be introduced, a new internal conflict to be introduced for William Wallace. He is spurned, of course, by the treatment of his family and the killing of Murrin by the British soldiers, and he does
His country.
and his country, of course. That's the larger thing, and it sort of stays there, like you said, Abram. It just sort of like that continues out. But I think to the movie's credit, a little bit, they do justify it with a line in the film, which is York is where all of the attacks on my country were staged, is what William Wallace says. So it's a necessary, like, strategic step for Scotland's freedom. And then, as we know from the characterization of King Edward Longshanks, he's not one to give up that easily. He's not going to take that embarrassment. So that continued fighting is necessary for the political ends of maintaining Scotland's freedom.
They also do make the attempt of, in that scene that I praised before, of William talking to the princess, this notion of, I know what Longshanks' peace looks like. It looks like all of these men that tried to negotiate peace in the past hanged in a building and my family killed.
Yeah.
But I just think that that's too many steps removed from the vengeance quest that the audience is compelled by. But I nonetheless, as I said before, it's sort of this feeling of, I think we've run out of things for Wallace to want to do, but that doesn't mean that there isn't still interesting stuff that just happens on like a filmic level in the second half. And it goes back to why I was saying that this is still a fun movie, and I had fun with it, because we get the siege of York, and we get some more cool battle sequences, and the plot then becomes the predicate for this stuff happening. It's just that when the plot is the predicate, opposed to the character's motivation to avenge his wife, it's a lot less investing. It's a lot more of just, here's just a cool thing.
Yeah,
because
cool things.
Cool medieval action. And
The other trick I think we miss is that Braveheart is sorry, it's not Braveheart, it's William Wallace, as I come to learn. He's beaten. He's shot with an arrow. Yeah. He's basically left for dead, about to be killed, and he's brought back to safety. And we get that moment with Hollis. Is his name Hollis? Holland, Brendan Gleeson's character.
Brendan Gleeson's character.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's not Hollis.
It's close to that.
Something
You'll look
like
it
that.
up.
Hugan?
Hargis. Hag.
Hagrid?
Haggis is no. We can do this, folks. Look it up on the internet.
Brendan Gleeson.
Hamlet.
Hamlet. I had the IMDb pulled up. He's not on the IMDb.
Hagen?
Hamish.
Hamish.
Thank you. Hamish has a moment with his father there, as Mel Gibson is like dying in the foreground, but from there we cut to him killing a noble, and then jumping out of a window off on horseback, which is fucking cool. But there's no, again, to the point before of we're missing the moment of contemplation where Mel Gibson transfers his rage for Murrow to a desire to fight for independence. We miss the moment of him going from his lowest back to his full strength.
Yeah.
It's sort of like in Fistful of Dollars when Clint Eastwood's like dying in a casket, and then the next moment he's like shooting guys in the town. It goes back to this idea of me needing to buy into the myth of the character.
Yeah.
We're not taking the time to humanize him, which is another moment when we could have brought us as an audience back to a place of emotional investment in that second half.
Yeah, I think that the second half focuses on Scotland's arc.
I agree.
Really. Scotland as, it's a character. The place is a character, if you will.
Of course.
But I do think that the focus is instead of on Freedom Braveheart, the character, having his arc, on the people of Scotland rallying around the force of William Wallace, trying to overcome their internal struggles for who's going to lead the battles or be the highest power in Scotland once we do have our freedom, that kind of stuff. And to the film's credit, I do find the concept of the legend of William Wallace inspiring other people to be a very fascinating part of the film's world and William Wallace as a character, because seeing him walk up in front of a giant crowd of guys, and of course, it's Scotland in the 200 BC or whatever the hell has happened, and no one's ever seen it. There's not pictures of him. You've only seen it if you've been in the room with him or seen him on the battlefield. So they've all heard stories about him. Like, no, he should be 10 feet tall, and he jumps out of windows and slices 10 guys' throats with one sword at a time. Like, that element of his character and that inspiring the rest of the Scots to rally around their sense of freedom, which to that point they had been very staying in their houses, taking the rap on the knuckles and worse from the British ostensibly police that had been installed in their towns. Watching them sort of grow out of that and become a unified force, even though they're sort of ragtag built together with shoelaces and bubble gum. Basically, they're scrapping together pot lids and stuff for their weapons. I find that to be compelling, but I think the film is at odds with itself in the Scottish people rising up behind William Wallace, and then also about half of that second half of the film is looking back at Edward Longshanks and his son and his and the son's wife and the wife's friend, and there's 5 or 6 characters from the English side that I don't really care about, and Edward the Bruce has got his father. It looks like the Elephant Man. It's what the hell is going on here?
Excuse you.
Don't care.
But
I think that
is the father.
There's too many B tier characters that we try to focus on in that second half to where it gets a little bit muddled for me. I think the first half is a lot more focused. It has the comedic tone, which appeals to me a little bit more, but I feel like its focus on William Wallace almost solely makes it a little bit easier to be sold into his arc and the momentum of the film, where it feels a little bit muddled to me in that second half when we're jumping around and we're in England here, and then the queen, Princess Queen is here, and then she's over there, and then there's just so much going on that my mind doesn't really find it as easy to follow along with or be engaged in any of these scenes or how they connect together.
Timo, were you going to say something?
Yeah, ask you a question about the father, because I also don't know what his deal was.
I don't know what his deal was, but who played the father? Is it Stellan Skarsgård? Sounded a lot like him.
It looks like Stellan Skarsgård, doesn't it?
The
But
voice,
it's not.
No way.
the
No.
voice was similar too, I thought.
Yeah, it looks like him and it sounds like him, but it's not Stellan Skarsgård. But his deal, as I understand it, of course, he
Leprosy?
is Robert the Bruce's father. Well, yes, he's afflicted with some sort of disease, obviously, but his deal is that he's like the true noble of the Bruce family, but because he is afflicted with this disease, he cannot be seen publicly, and so he sort of like defers to Robert the Bruce to be the public face of it. But he is, of course, the puppeteer for the Bruce noble family, who is the controlling noble family of Scotland. Like they're the high ups. They're like, and they want to stay good with the king, obviously. But Robert the Bruce, his whole conflict throughout the entirety of the film, which becomes a larger focus in the second half, is I like what William Wallace is doing. He's a cool guy. He's a mythical figure. But I think this is a line that I wrote down in the film.
I've got a thesis coming. I've got some ideas.
Yeah, towards the latter half, in that second half, he says, "I don't want to lose heart. I want to believe as he did." And that is really the point of that second half of the film, the entirety of the film, but really the second half when we are fighting back against Britain. It is about loyalty and like belief in some sort of sense of larger freedom and doing what must be done towards those ends, and rejecting these like material or like surface level political sort of connections that all the nobles have with the British crown. It's about doing what's right. It's about maintaining independence and freedom for your people. And that's what the film's about, and that's what makes it still compelling for me, especially when we are seeing William Wallace become like less of a warrior poet, I guess you would say, and more of like a vengeful spirit as he like appears at the dude's door riding a horse and like stomps on his bed and then jumps out the window with the same horse, and he's riding across the mountaintops alone and all of this stuff. He has become like, he has attained this level of mythical figure that is, more singled out, as he loses the support of the nobles, as he fights back farther and farther against the British crown. But at the same time, I know where I was going with the second half there, but that's sort of my thesis on the second half of the film and why I still find it compelling.
Here's kind of why I don't find the second half's theme super compelling. In this idea of freedom kind of rings a little hollow because of our setting. And I think our setting of a feudal medieval society in which your logical brain, and if I know a little bit of history, so I know that your serfs and your William Wallace characters, your common men, have no chance of having any freedom, even if their lords and ladies are nice to them and like generally good. The idea that they can go and rise up against the king and achieve some sort of freedom, which is not very defined in this film, doesn't ring very true to me, because okay, you're just gonna have Robert the Bruce, who, I mean, sure, he's like a better leader and nicer to the people, but like, you are still not free, even in your 1995 American sense of it. The transposition of that value onto a society that is so different and has actual like legitimate different values about freedom that are reflected in its political system and in the way, and which deeply affects how this film's plot and themes play out, because it is in the second half all about who are you aligned with, who are you fighting against. And so William Wallace is this character that's fighting for freedom in an essentially an impossible battle, given that the society around him will not allow his ultimate vision, which would probably be to ransack all of England and kill the king, I guess.
Unclear.
So
Yeah.
I find that I would have liked a bit more of a refined and nuanced take on this. Like, what are they fighting for? They're fighting for something. They really are. But it's beyond just simple freedom. I think that that's a very American way to put it in the film, and it definitely shows the film as it's like this pre 9/11, like America is awesome in 1995 according to Americans. And so this freedom idea percolates a little too far into the film, where it maybe shouldn't, or they should reevaluate how it interacts with the world that they've created.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a lot of religious imagery in this film.
There is a lot of it. I was thinking about that.
Abram? No, Abram, I only really, I really noticed it when it became, I think it's subtle all the way through, particularly in the ending scene when William Wallace is, brought in on a cross and is then laid out on a cross and is then, hanged and sort of stretched out in a cross form. I think it's really quite subtly done.
And I think this also sort of speaks to, again, to Timo's point and to the overall sort of politics or message of the film of just like when Mel Gibson's talking about freedom, he's talking about good old American freedom and the freedom that you get from believing in God, and you die and you live a good life and you go to heaven, you see your wife again. Like that's the film's concerned with freedom in like an ephemeral way.
Yeah.
And like in a religious like American nationalism way. And it's just part of why, and coupled with the fact that Mel Gibson's not Scottish. Mel Gibson has no concept of what actually happened in this time period.
Yeah, well, yeah.
There's nothing to Braveheart for me. And again, I don't necessarily say that as a pejorative in the sense that I like a lot of movies that have nothing going on in them, on like a messaging level. But that's why, to me, I just watch Braveheart and I'm like, yeah, the battles are cool, the cinematography is great, the score is great.
They've got boiling oil. What more can you want?
Yeah, a lot of boiling. Those motherfuckers can boil oil like nobody else.
Like nobody's goddamn business.
They're rivaling KFC.
Yeah, I mean,
but
step
it's
aside Ronald McDonald.
Yeah, but it's like, do you really think that many people who were like financing Braveheart or writing the script or editing the script or like working on pre-production stuff are like, man, I wonder how our themes are going to interface with like the political situation of Scotland? Nobody gave a fuck. And that's just sort of the attitude I bring to criticizing the messaging of this film. There just is none because there's no care for it.
Yeah. Abram, you're absolutely correct in saying that no one gave a fuck because, famously, this film is maligned as one of the most historically inaccurate of all time. I only have some trivia to this effect. I don't have like specific things that they got wrong because there is a lot of it. Believe me.
I got a couple.
Scrolling through some trivia things. Oh, Tucker, you have some specific things?
Yeah, well, I have some specific things that are in the plot of this movie that are very explicitly did not happen in real life, and that, frankly, almost all of the elements of this film that are iconic and work for a movie script. Of course, you have to reshape history in some different ways to apply it to make a 3-hour film of a guy's 30-year life or whatever. Are all fictionalized. His dad didn't die when he was a kid. He was a noble. He was actually a noble. He wasn't a peasant. He probably didn't have a wife to die to inspire him. The English or the French princess was like 2 years old at the time, so they probably never even met. And there's so many things that either explicitly could not have happened or are so unlikely to have happened that this movie is the most facsimile, like hodgepodge together of like, there was a guy that fought for Scottish freedom and it would be fun for us to make an action movie about him. And it boils down to that, which makes it like the least like politically interested in actual human history and in historical politics that you can possibly get. We talk about a lot of films that are based on history and some of the ways that in which they rub against what actually happened. But this is a film that, to me, it doesn't bother me personally that it is so divorced from actual history. Frankly, Scotland is so divorced from where my mind is that like this could have happened and I would be none the wiser. Which, of course, uninformed, dumb American, whatever. But I think it is an indictment on the thematic value of this film, or its positioning as the Scottish historical film of all time, because it kind of is, that they kind of just came up with all this shit.
Yes.
And they made a superhero movie about a guy. And if we had any preconceived notions of Scottish history or the life of William Wallace, we'd be going in like, oh, all right, can't wait to see how they adapt it. What the hell is this? What did they do? Who are these characters? This isn't the William Wallace I know.
Yes. Okay. So I have some stuff about this in the broader strokes in the writing stages of this film, because as I said, this is widely considered to be one of the most inaccurate films of all time, ranked third of most inaccurate film of all time by the acclaimed British paper The Times.
What's you got to tell me what number 1 and 2 are, man. I gotta know.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. I'll look it up. I'll look it up.
In
I
the
got you.
interim, yeah, look it up. But writer Randall Wallace, no relation, I assume, said that he did historical research after completing the script so that the dramatic elements would take precedence over historical recreation.
Okay.
And
Interesting way to do that. I'm pretty sure most scripts start with research.
No, not this guy. But basically,
Randy.
this is me remembering from reading through this stuff. He went to Scotland, learned about William Wallace, and then wrote a script, having just kind of heard about him. He
went on. You know what? He went on a walking tour in Edinburgh, and they talked about him. And then he was like, "This would make a really good movie." And he was looking around at the sites, and he was like,
yeah,
got a script
and
coming up.
Mel Gibson does have a quote about this. It's quite long, so I won't read the whole thing. But he says, "Some people said that in telling the story, we messed up history. It doesn't bother me because what I'm giving you is a cinematic experience. And I think films are there to entertain, then teach, then inspire. There probably were historical inaccuracies, quite a few, but maybe there weren't. Who's to say? There were, Mel Gibson. There were many." Because there was very little history about the man. It wasn't necessarily authentic. In some of the stuff I read about him, he wasn't as nice as he was on film. We romanticized him a bit. But that's the language of film. You have to make it cinematically acceptable.
Mel Gibson romanticizes himself.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
He does make a 3-hour movie about himself as an overt Christ figure.
Yes, the Christ figure, revolutionary, all-around good guy, really nice husband who,
Super
that's a bit of wish fulfillment for Mel Gibson in real life.
Any other specifics, Tanner?
Let's see if I have anything else here about the inaccuracies.
I think a huge amount of the medievalness of the film is inaccurate, and that the time, if you were to say, okay, this is 1300, what armor are they wearing? What swords are they using? I think it's all not very accurate, but I don't know. It's badass. I mean, if we're just gonna go on the value of entertainment value of these battle scenes, I want to point out how that sound editing win is so deserved, because they cut out everything in the battle except for the battle scenes, and all you get to hear is a rhythmic beat of bang swing splat, and it's constant, and it's done so very intentionally with the edit. But if you just sit there and listen and close your eyes, it would still be very, you would feel this rhythm of the battle. I think the sound design is it's very 90s,
it's awesome,
kind of cliche at times, but I think that the rhythm and the editing of it is really good when it comes to just it's funny. If you it sounds kind of like someone's banging on pots and pans for a while in the battle, and that's the only thing you hear. It's awesome. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I think those battle scenes are phenomenal, really. It's what stuck with me after watching this for the first time several years ago, is the scale and impressiveness of these battles. They used, I have trivia here, 1,600 extras for those battle scenes.
Irish
most of
conscripts?
them were... most of them were reserve in the Irish Army. Different companies, from the same area, and there were actually rivalries common amongst these extra companies. Apparently, some of the battle scenes are far more realistic than intended, as people from rival companies were trying to beat each other up. So, fun stuff.
Hey,
but yeah, I mean,
shows.
these battles are intense. When we are looking at the wide shots of people running across fields, or when we are right up in something as someone is getting hacked or slashed or shot with an arrow, or straight up getting their head chopped off. There's a number of those in this film. You feel it. You feel it. You feel all the impacts here. You feel the chaos of it. You feel the dirtiness of it, the griminess of it.
Well, this is a grime
really,
time
really
movie.
Impressive.
This is the hair and
it's
makeup.
100% grime time, baby.
Oh my God, Mel Gibson stands up in some shots. You're like, oh my God, he's covered in 4 layers of sweat and blood and dirt and mud and.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome.
He's
I
got
really,
that.
really
He's got
think
that
these are
rag,
impressive.
man. That rag of his is highly suspicious.
I think that what really impresses me so much about this film's action and makes it so distinct from other historical historical epics of this kind that have a lot of action is that the Scottish team that this guy puts together fights unlike anything you've ever seen in a film. These guys have the weirdest tactics, and they're jumping off roofs, and they're swinging behind a group of guys, and they're building up these weird contraptions that are gonna take down. Like, they're the most ramshackle battering ram made of like three guys' houses. That is like, it's so strange, and you never know what they're going to do next. So it really kept me on my toes to just see what were they gonna pull out of their pockets to like take down the oppressive English forces.
Yeah.
I really found that to be a fascinating element of this film that gave it an energy and a sense of humor in the combat that many films don't ever really touch because they're about the grounded realism of battle. But it's like, yeah, okay, these tactics are goofy, but like it mimics the energy that the camaraderie of these guys have when we cut back and we've got Stephen and Hamish and William Wallace in there. They're palling around and throwing crude joke like yo mama jokes basically at each other.
There is a yo mama joke in this
there
movie.
There literally is, yes. I think he did a yo mama joke and a no you in one joke. It was really funny.
Here's something
I
I'll
really
say
do
about
love the energy.
The wackiness of the battles, I think, is communicated really well. That we see them from the British or the English perspective a lot of times, and we get to see the like Tanner's snobs v slobs. We get to see the snobs' reaction to the slobs and how they
don't know
fight.
what's going to happen,
and they don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know what's going to happen, and that's funny to see what goes on there. So I just wanted to point out that that's an interesting choice of how they shoot the battles.
I also think that the first battle sequence, which actually might be my favorite in the film.
Yeah,
is,
when it's
is,
it's, yeah, I got another point.
Yeah, it's essential because it communicates on a much smaller scale the brutality that every sort of action carries with it. I mean, when
it's like the Northman.
Yeah,
it's kind of proto-Northman, yeah.
Mm-hmm. When William is fighting initially in the town and he gets the hammer and he's like hitting a guy in the back with the hammer.
Jesus Christ,
over and over again.
He takes him out at the knee and then crushes him right in the spine and then just goes for the head. It's like a 3-hit combo that he does on this guy.
Yeah, everything to cutting off a leg to smashing a head to the impact of an arrow. It in this more intimate setting establishes that every one of these weapons means business and everyone fucking hurts. Mm-hmm. And then, so when you have that knowledge as an audience member, when you end up on these battles that are sort of incalculably or sort of incomprehensibly large, you carry with it the knowledge that you know what these guys on a person-to-person level are doing.
Yeah.
So I think starting on that scale and ballooning out from there was a really effective decision on behalf of the choreography and the cinematography to establish on a sort of visceral level, here's what it looks and feels like 1-to-1. Mm-hmm. Now let's make it 1,000 to 1,000, and just and you feel it.
Yeah,
I think I wrote in my Letterboxd review, I would go from lying down to somebody started fighting and I'd sit up. So I'm like, ooh, cool stuff, and I'd lie back down. But for the time I was sitting up, there was just this harmony of technical filmmaking, and I think as we were saying at the top, all of those tech awards are deserved. Mm-hmm. The cinematography and editing do a lot of heavy work here. Also, the score does too.
Yes, I love the score.
The score is excellent. And
the bagpipe is just a cool instrument. The Scottish, God love them. They get a lot wrong, but what they got right was that bagpipe. That bagpipe's a hard ass instrument to bring into battle, baby.
You line up 5 pipers in your back line and just let them blast the whole time. And your enemy, I mean, they might as well just go home because that shit's so annoying that they can't stand it anyway.
And it underscores those battles, and it brings out the excitement of them, of course. But it also just ingratiates you in this period of Scottish history, even though a lot of it was apparently filmed in Ireland. There's only a few limited shots actually filmed in the Scottish Highlands, but it makes you feel like you're there when you see William Wallace riding across a ridge that's 1,000 feet in the air, and it's all misty down below, and there's bagpipes playing. You're like, this is Braveheart, baby. I'm in it. I'm there.
There's a beautiful shot where he like crests a mountain and the camera begins to spin around him, and you get a sense of the scale of the landscape. And to me, those are the moments that largely make me forget the characters and plot and theme deficiencies. So I'm just like, God damn, look at all those hills, you know?
Yeah. There's a similar shot when Braveheart Freedom and his wife of 20 minutes are hanging out
Braveheart
on the top of the mountain, and it's like a nice silhouette 2-shot, and then the camera starts moving backwards and zooming out. You're like, oh no, this is a helicopter shot, and it just keeps going and going and going. You're like, ooh, I said out loud in that moment, I was like, whoa, what a shot.
I like that we're giving this film sort of like a Birdman-esque title with Braveheart, Freedom, and his wife of 20 minutes.
Yeah, I really think that this film is a remarkable technical achievement, and I think that, and I don't think anyone would really contest this, but that's absolutely why it won Best Picture.
Yeah.
And made a ton of money at the box office, unlike
because
many
it's epic. It's
Best Picture winners.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It
is epic.
If you're in 1995, 3 hours in the movie theater over the summer, I mean, come on.
Yeah, and I think that the technical skill is also combined with a lot of other factors. It's not just a film that looks really good from a cinematography angle, and there's of course the impressive shots of the Scottish countryside, and I find that all to be very appealing, but I think it's combined with great technical elements of the production design, and the performances across the board are not exceptional, but they're very grounded in this film's reality. And as you said, Timo, the sound editing and the music, everything works together to deliver you an entertaining package that is really impressively crafted. I mean, Mel Gibson as his first real feature that everyone knows, but his second feature period. Like this is a crazy feat of direction, because the film does have personality and has scope, and it really does feel distinct from a lot of other historical epics, a genre that the Academy and especially Best Picture winners are not, they don't stray away from. We've gotten quite a few of them here. We're almost done. Wings is kind of, historical epic, World War I, whatever, but
it's the start of human history according to movies, World War I.
Yes, of course. Yeah, according to us.
But yeah, I just think that Mel Gibson did a really impressive job directing this film, because it's so distinct in that way.
Yeah, and something that I respect about Braveheart, and will always stick in my mind about Braveheart, because we'll probably never get anything like it again, is the practicality of it.
Oh,
1,600 extras, okay? We are never going to get...
They're just not.
We're never
going to
get another movie where you get 1,600 dudes and you have to reshoot the scenes because this is real trivia. Because some of them were wearing wristwatches and sunglasses when they were filming this stuff. They have to redo it.
I caught extras looking at the spike in the lens a couple times. I caught extras.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, camera, and then they move past it and I see you looking right at me.
But it's just much easier for a production to CGI a field full of guys fighting now.
Yeah, they'll get 100 dudes, and then they'll put the remaining 1,500 in computer land.
Yeah, or they could. This is trivia I found as well. When you see those shots, there's multiple of them of the archers of any given army. Sort of notching their arrows and letting them fly through the air. That's not digital. They could have done that digitally, and it maybe would have looked the same. Maybe it would have looked worse. If you're looking at a Zack Snyder's 300 or something like that. But also, they did that for real. Those are real arrows flying through the air. And that's something I just dig about this movie, is that it's all real. Another real thing, the horses. The horses are an important, integral part of these battle sequences. Mm-hmm. You're seeing the violence inflicted on these guys, of course, but another element of chaos is seeing a dude jab a horse in the chest and it goes tumbling over and the guy flies off and gets crushed by his horse. That's the chaos and the violence of these battles, and they made 200 mechanical horses for this movie.
Dang. Wow.
That were nitrogen powered. They put nitrogen tanks in the back
powered
of these things
horse?
and pushed them on rails.
And then stabbed. That's cool.
Freedom, Braveheart, his wife of 20 minutes, and a nitrogen powered horse.
And their nitrogen powered horse.
The production was investigated by animal welfare organizations because these horses look so realistic. They were convinced that the horses were real, and they just weren't, and they looked really impressive.
There's the crazy moment where, and this is so well edited and the tension is so high when the heavy cavalry are charging and Frida Braveheart is yelling, hold, hold,
Yeah,
hold.
yeah, yeah.
He says that so many times, my heart was gonna like come out my
Yeah.
ass.
Yeah.
And because there's a aside from earlier in the film of what are we gonna do against the heavy cavalry? We're gonna make super fucking long spears.
Twice as long as a man.
And I'm like looking around, like, where are these spears? Where are these spears?
Well, some
and
men are longer than others.
hold now. And everybody pulls up the spears, and these things are just going through horses.
Yes.
And there's a horse is not a small creature.
It's notably quite large, actually.
And a medieval European war horse is like
Yeah.
the biggest horse you can
Bred
find.
to be the largest and heaviest thing imaginable.
Yeah,
It's all really impressive. Yeah.
and it looks great. And you're so right, Abram, that the editing, I just want to say the editing of the battles
Yeah.
manages to be frenetic, super fast, and yet very clear. We're not cutting on hits and
Yeah.
stuff. We're actually seeing all of our like so many practical sword hits and like everything that you need to do to make a fight look real is happening practically in the film. But we're getting boom, 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 shot after shot after shot. And yet it's still like I know what's happening. I can see what's going on. Like I could tell who's where and who's striking who and what battle formations are moving into what position, and like it all functions as a cohesive unit. Even though a less well edited movie would be all over the place in terms of just visual garbage, really, during these battles. But it's very clear in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to do a 360 from the battles for just a moment to go like to the opposite. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, I think Mel Gibson, his performance does this, but I think the movie as a whole also does this. And unfortunately, because Murren dies early on, you don't get a lot of it. But the softness of it is also quite impressive. Like that scene where they spend the night together, they have sex for the first time after they get married, is like very well shot. It's very slow. It's very soft. It's very sensual as you're seeing like the
be there.
like the the
Girl wants to
moonlight
be in
and
the
like
bush.
the babbling brook and the waterfall behind them and the breath and everything. I'm like, this is
Breasts.
well,
they
I wasn't
they
gonna-
show
Okay,
both
that
of their
you-
boobs. To be fair, you see
yes.
his huge
Yes.
fucking pecs and her boobs. So
They're
it's
both
both
nipping pretty
it-
hard in that
it-
scene.
They
yeah,
are.
because it's like 30 degrees out and you see their breath and everything. I love it. I love that scene because it shows that Braveheart can do both if it had the inclination to do more of the latter.
I agree. I do think it's a little exploitative to make characters get naked and then to kill them off very shortly later. I think that
Well, fair point.
like I don't necessarily think that's like the greatest move ever in this film. But you know what? Props to this movie for having a lot of elided sex. We get the right before it and then we get the day after and we're like, yep, they fucked. We know that. Thanks.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that way of telling it in the story. Hollywood
Phil.
movies should do that more, I feel like. Cut out.
Oh,
I wanted. It's the Lubitsch.
We
part.
don't
The
need
Lubitsch
sex
could-
scene discourse. We
you
don't
wanna
need
get
sex
into-
scene
you wanna get
discourse.
into it?
No, we don't need sex scene discourse on BLB. We need to talk about other things from Braveheart. Is there anything else that anyone thinks about Braveheart that's impressive that they want to note particularly?
All I want to say, Tanner, is I want to say two things. First of
Okay.
all, another great moment of physicality is when we've just shown our dick and balls to the Englishmen,
Yeah.
and they're shooting
Yes.
more arrows at us. We get these hyper closes of freedom and the God lover, and they're and he's like,
Who's
he's
the
like,
God
"Damn."
lover?
Steven.
Steven.
Oh,
And
The
Steven,
Irish guy.
Steven's like, damn, freedom. I've been talking to God. And he says, I'm going to be fine, but you're kind of fucked.
Yes, it's so funny. He's like, God says you're gonna die, buddy.
It's not only a
So
great
funny.
dialogue exchange, but the arrows penetrating the shields right
Yes.
next to their faces is great. Again, great moment of tension. All I want to say though, Tanner, is you're making all these big claims about the death of practicality when Dune Part 2 is nominated for Best Picture and we talk about the real sandworm. I'm going to make you eat your hat.
Yeah, fair point. You know what? I will wear a hat to eat. Okay. When they breed and genetically modify a real Muad'Dib. No, not a Muad'Dib. Oh God.
Shai Hulud.
Shai Hulud. Thank you. I betrayed myself as a Dune fan, forgetting the terminology there.
We get to minute hour 10 of the episode, and we're devolving into Dune trivia.
Anyway.
I heard they're developing actual Pandora for Avatar 4.
Oh, yes! Yeah, they're just going to film it in Disney World.
Can't wait to go.
Tanner, great reference.
I do have...
Oh, wait, clear the field. They're going to make the next Star Wars movie at Galaxy's Edge.
Oh, there we go. Good stuff. I do have one final bit of trivia that is really tailor-made for one Tucker Hazel here, because it involves one of his favorite directors, who was also nominated for Best Picture in 1995. You want to try and take a stab at this one, Tucker? Favorite director? What?
Woody Allen?
No. Other guy you really like. You
Eric
watched.
Gilliam?
No, you watched
Joe
most of his
Russo?
movies recently.
Watched most movies recently?
Yeah, you watched most of his movies recently.
Oh,
1995, big movie starring Tom Hanks, starring Gary Sinise, starring Kevin Bacon.
Robert Zemeckis? Wait.
No, Ron Howard. Tucker, Ron Howard.
Oh, I forgot about him.
Yeah, your number one guy. Anyway, so I'll get to it. We can pull up the score sheet if we'd like. So Mel Gibson was on the set of Ransom, his 1996 film, when Braveheart was nominated for Best Picture, along with Ron Howard's Apollo 13. He pulled a prank on Ron Howard and the producer of that film, Brian Grazer, by giving them an ad that claimed that Braveheart was considered for the Best Moonshot Award, showing him a picture, of course, of all the Scottish soldiers showing their ass to the British Army. So, just a funny little joke that Mel Gibson pulled there.
He's such a funny little guy, isn't he?
Well,
Well,
Hollywood may have forgiven him, but, we haven't. I don't think.
Atone.
BLB does not forgive Mel Gibson.
No. Crazy that he said all that shit, and then they're like, they gave him 15 years after that, and he's like, yeah, you're back in. We'll nominate
Hacksaw Ridge is a good movie.
I haven't seen Hacksaw Ridge, so
It's a good one. I watched it on an airplane, so
maybe it's so good that I'll also forgive Mel Gibson, but I doubt it.
I don't forgive him, but it's a good movie.
Okay.
Oh, Passion of the Christ 2, Christ Returns, the Resurrection.
That's not what it's called.
Passion of the Christ 2, Easter.
Yeah.
Shall we give this film a
Alrighty.
score? Shall we punch a number in? I was
do it.
kind of brainstorming what number I'm going to give this movie the whole episode. I think I know what it is now, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Are we ready to find out? 3,
Yes.
2, 1, go!
Whoa. Solid range here.
Yeah, we've got
Almost a
ourselves a
3-point range.
score. It is 7.3. Let's see what we have to do in the tie zone.
Oh, yeah.
We've got 3 films we're going to have to debate it. But
not again.
Before we dive into that rat's nest, the point breakdown, starting at the bottom, I gave it a 6, followed by Abrams' 7.2, and then Tucker's 7.7, and then finally Tanner's 8.4 at the top. So a pretty big spread, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Starting with our number 61st film on the list with a score of 7.3, The Last Emperor, historical epic, Braveheart, above or
True.
below? Above. Okay. Continuing on, Forrest Gump, of recent memory, should be easy to compare, 7.3, at the 60th spot, above or below?
2 America movies.
True.
I say above.
I say above as well.
Below.
I'm gonna say above. I think Brave. Well, yeah, I gave Forrest Gump a 0.7 higher score. I'm gonna say above. I think for Braveheart, in that it has less to say, but is more fun and awesome.
It is more fun and awesome. This is hard to dispute.
I believe that's what we're judging here on the quest for the best is.
Yes. And finally, Timo, last one that needs to fall above or below.
59th spot, The Deer Hunter.
Above.
Above.
Well, I think I'm gonna say below, but I'm overruled. It's all right. There we go. At
It's a
spot.
high climber.
Yeah, it climbed above all 3 of its opposition. So Braveheart is going to go at spot number 59. That's right.
Sure.
I think the last thing I'd say about Braveheart is that I just think, because we didn't talk too much about the runtime of the film. We talked about what it does with the runtime, but 3 hours, I just think that Braveheart gives us too much time to think about what it lacks.
Oh yeah.
If this was a 2-hour film and it had the same level of characterization and thematics and plot, I think you could have easily put another point on my score. But when we're going to 3 hours, I'm looking for a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we're provided with that.
I'll be honest. I found it pretty breezy, to be honest with you. It's one of the breezier 3-hour films I've had the pleasure of watching.
It's no John Wick 4.
It is no John Wick 4. That's true. That's true.
Holy
But
shit!
here's
Can't
the
wait
thing.
to review that next year. You know what I'm saying?
Funny thing about it is that I feel the length of John Wick 4, but I revel in the length of John Wick 4. I love it. I love the length of John Wick 4.
Yeah, because it rolls down that staircase for the 3rd time. You're like, let's go!
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah. But yeah, there you have it, folks. Sadly, no wheel this week.
No wheel because we are so.
Will died. We didn't mourn it. We can mourn it now. We can have like a little bagpipe. The death of the wheel.
The bagpipes, it's perfect.
Can you make
There we go.
Funeral of the wheel.
Can you make an image of the wheel on a like a cross?
Yeah, I think
We're
crucify
we
the
gotta give it
wheel.
a Viking funeral. We gotta send it out on a boat and light an arrow on fire. And...
We'll do a Viking funeral where it's on a cross.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll put a cross on the boat and we'll send it
We're
on the
mixing our
water.
metaphors here a little bit, but I'm okay with this.
I don't care.
Those good old Vikings, they were known for being real good Christians.
Yes, God-fearing Christians, those Vikings.
Just like us.
Well, there's no wheel because
Vikings.
there are 2 movies left, but we've decided which one we're doing last, so there's only one movie that is our option for next week. Tucker, what film are we going to be watching as the second
I didn't
to
even pull
last
it up.
Yeah,
episode?
we're all pulled out of whack here.
Let's
I'm revealing it as I type it into Letterboxd.
Yes.
All the King's Men.
Yes.
Yep, 1949 Best Picture winner, directed by Robert Rossen, starring Broderick Crawford, John Ireland, Joanne Drew, and John Derek, and Mercedes McCambridge.
Is this
Shepard
movie
Strudwick,
about-
Ralph Dunkey.
Is this movie perchance about the English royalty?
All the King's Men is the story of the rise of politician Willie Stark from a rural country seat to the governor's mansion. He might have been a pretty good guy if too much power and women hadn't gone to his head.
All these women are going to his head.
Oh, not
Hello.
that. Well,
So is it British then? Is it or American politics?
Oh.
we'll find out
his
next
name
time.
is Willie, and there's women on his head. Hold on.
There's something there.
Give me a week.
We're going to
Alright,
find
good.
out about All the King's Men. We're going to see, is this a British movie? Is it about royal
Hour
family?
50, let's go.
Oh, nice and light.
That is good to hear. That is good to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks for discussing Braveheart. I actually had a very enjoyable time watching it. This is a very enjoyable movie just to sit back and enjoy. I said the same thing twice in that sentence. Anyway, we're going to see you all next week to talk about All the King's Men. Until then, stay cool, keep warm, and peace. I sign up for that. Can I get on the intellectual dark
Chisel
web?
John.
I've said it once. I've said it a million times. It would be so easy if we wanted to do that. It's so easy.
Put Quest on there?
Yeah. All we need to do is one why BLB left the left video, and we'll be set for life.
Oh, yeah.
All we need to do to get into the intellectual dark web is make a positive Braveheart review.